So what's going on guys, Kids here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the top 3 best builds in Black Myth Wukong. So I've reached level 100 and throughout my playthrough and fighting different bosses, I've now figured out the most optimized equipment, spirits, relics, what stances should you focus on upgrading and much more. Our build's main focus is to stack as much critical hit chance and damage increase as possible, while also having defenses, so we would survive hard enemies. By using the best of the best gear sets, weapons and perks, all of these setups will carry us through every single boss fight and much more. So, if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So, our build's primary objective is to charge heavy attacks, while sprinting and retaining focus after a perfect dodge, so then we could quickly fill up the bar and do massive amounts of damage. Unlike my other builds, this setup will emphasize on talents, gear and skills that will focus more on survivability, speed, stamina recovery and high damage hits. So it will be extremely hard for the enemy to hit us, because we will have constantly 100% stamina, plus relatively high defenses, while still at the same time doing massive amounts of DPS. So let's take a look at the best setup. And first of all we have the transformation, and the best one to use is the Red Tides, because it deals significant burn damage to bosses. Moreover, dodging in any direction and following that up with a heavy attack will perform a powerful move when you have full focus. This fits the theme of our build, which is mobility and high damage with speed. The Red Tides allows you to transform into a wolf and inflict Scorch Bane on the enemy with each attack. Light attacks with this spell will have you constantly slash at the enemy, with each hit building up your focus. Therefore, unlocking and leveling the Moon Realm will allow your heavy attacks to hit harder, after you execute a perfect dodge while at full focus. This may be a combination that is difficult to execute at first, but when you do, you will do huge amount of damage. Then next up we have the Staff stances, and for this build I mainly recommend to use the Smash stance. The best talents and skills are Force Unbound, Resolute Counterflow and Peace from Peril. Force Unbound enables sharing while sprinting, while Peace from Peril enables your focus to be retained after a perfect dodge. This allows you to constantly charge heavy attacks, unless at the perfect time. And finally, the Resolute Counterflow enables a combo that deals very high damage, and is very helpful as a defensive tool as well. Then next up, let's take a look at the best foundation setup. Simenian Agility, Endurance and Deft Evasion are the best foundation skills for a Smash stance build. All three aid in survivability via the dodging and sprinting. Simenian reduces cost, Endurance reduces spirit cost, and Deft Evasion makes the initial dodge create more space. I would recommend to progress this tree by taking passives earlier in the game, and then switch to the survival at level 50+ for more damage passives. Next up we have the Curious, and for this build the best Curious is the Fine Chine Tea Bowl and the Back Scratcher. They are the best fit for our Smash build, because they increase the max stamina and stamina recovery rate. These two will help in survivability, by using dodge and sprinting to avoid attacks. I would recommend as you progress to higher levels, to swap these Curious for more damage oriented, like the Maitreya's Orb, Gold Spike Plate and the Cat Eyes Beads. And for all of them I've already made a video, so check it out. Then next up we have the Spirit, and the best spirit for fighting bosses is the Wandering Wight, because it deals damage the most and can knock back enemies once upgraded. The Wandering Wight spirit can give you another stun to complement the Immobilize when you have your QI built up. Therefore you can immobilize with the mana to hold a creature, and then stun it when in close range with the Wandering Wight. This combo gives you control and damage while playing in a Smash melee range. Then for one of the last parts of our build we have the Relic. The main relic that I recommend is the Fuming Ears relic with the Whistling Winds passive, because of the increased damage when performing a perfect dodge. Dodging is the most important mechanic in the game, and this gives you an offensive bonus when avoiding attacks. Moreover, this relic can be obtained very early and is helpful throughout the game. Next up we have the gear and items that we should use, and I recommend to start with the Golden Armor set and the Spike Shaft Staff. Golden Armor boosts the focus generation, attack damage after using a spirit, and your QI gains. Therefore you can generate more unique resources, combining focus attacks with spirits for massive damage. The Golden Armor has a 2 and 4 piece bonus, along with a unique effect on the mask. So we want to equip the Fireproof Mantle, then the Golden Mask of Fury, Golden Embroidered Shirt, Golden Arm Guard and the Golden Greaves. And then for the staff, the Spike Shaft Staff, which grants us focus after seeing through the enemies, and this pairs very well with the Resolute Counterflow skill. You can get all of these items after completing the chapter 3. Next up, let's move over to the best spells, and we will mainly use the Immobilize, Cloud Step and once in a while a Plaque of Many. Immobilize lets you stun enemies, keeping them in one spot, which is useful even against tough bosses. You can make the stun last longer and deal more damage to those enemies, making it a critical spell for controlling single targets. In this setup we will focus on the talents like the Stagnation, Crash and Easy Prey to get most out of this skill. Then our Cloud Step spell is useful for the mobility aspect of creating distance away from the boss. You can use it both to attack or escape, and with the right talents, you can boost your critical hit chance or serve as a surprise attack. It also pairs well with a stamina-based dodging for quick and agile maneuvers. For Cloud Step, the best talents are Gallop, Converging Clouds and the Concealing Observation. And finally, the Pluck of Many spell creates clones for yourself to act as a decoy, but it uses a lot of mana and has a long cooldown and is not very effective overall. Plus casting it takes a while, leaving you vulnerable, so it's better to save your mana for more useful spells, like the Immobilize and Cloud Step, and only use the Pluck of Many occasionally. One good time to use it is before a fight, when you need a distraction to start off your combo. But however, if you use it often, then consider getting the Long Strand, Grey Hair and Synergy talents. This will help you to make the duplicates last longer and be more durable in harder boss fights. Then next up we have the Gourds, and the best one for our build is the Trailblazer Scarlet, because the first sip will replenish our HP to full. Moreover, you can add additional effects with the soaks and drinks, giving you even more bonuses. So for the bonus passives, I recommend to get the Pearl Veined Peach Pit, which massively increases health recovery from using the gourd when at critical health, or the Steel Ginseng, which upon using the gourd instantly gains a moderate amount of additional focus. And now last but not the least, we have come to the gameplay part. Every boss fight will be different, but I will try to summarize the overall experience. To effectively play a Smash Stance build, we want to focus on defensive playstyle that optimizes dodge cost reduction, stamina regeneration and Smash Stance talents. So we mainly want to build up our focus points by charging heavy attacks while moving, then unleash powerful strikes on the unsuspected enemies. And on top of that, we can use the Immobilize spell to control bosses and deal damage safely, without the fear of retaliation. The number one rule is to charge your heavy attacks while sprinting, to conserve stamina and avoid incoming damage. Then we want to deal damage when we need to combine light attacks, heavy attacks and combos for maximum damage output. We should prioritize building focus points during combat to enhance the effectiveness of our heavy attacks. Then for ranged damage we can switch to the Trust stance or use our spirit abilities when you need to attack from a distance. So then let's start off with the equipment, and the way I found it to work the best for me is just to use whatever best item you got until level 50, because after that milestone you will start getting access to more powerful items and set pieces that if you have 2 or 4 same gear sets, they will give you extra bonuses. And this will be very important in the mid to late game, because with each level the enemies will get harder and harder. So for us not to die hundreds of times, we want to maximize our damage and survivability, and this is where our equipment comes into play. So first of all, for the mask, we want to use the Bull King's mask. This will grant us moderate focus upon taking damage, and if the destined one is staggered, then we will get even more focus on top of everything else. Then for armor, we get the Monkey King's chest piece. Then for bracers, the Bull King's bracers. And lastly for boots, we use the Bull King's greaves. Among all the options in the game, the best armor set by far is the Monkey King set, but it can only be obtained during the chapter 6, after you defeat the 4 great beasts in the foothills area. And that's why for this build, you will see me mixing 2 best sets, so the Monkey King set and the Bull's King armor set. Both of them are the best of the best, but usually players start in the mid game acquiring the Bull's King set, and then only in the late game the King's Monkey set. Our endgame goal is to get the full Monkey King set, because this armor set offers high defense, and a variety of stat boosts, as well as synergies for spellcasting and critical hit chance. On top of that, the set bonuses are for 3 and 5 equipped pieces of gear. This is because the Jingu Bang, the mythical weapon, is considered to be the part of the full set as well. But in meantime, before we get our full endgame godlike build, we use the mid-game god build, which is the Bull's King armor. And this is primarily due to the extremely high defensive stats, including the set bonuses that boost this attribute even further. If you want to know what it feels like for the enemy hits to tickle you instead of doing real damage, then these gear pieces are the right pick for you. And if you want to get this equipment, then you need to complete Chapter 5 Secret Area Objective, and this will help you to acquire the necessary crafting materials. Then next up we have the weapon, and we are right now using the best alternative, the Golden Long Staff. This item can be crafted as an upgrade to the Long Redden Staff after defeating the Scion Long, which is an optional boss on the Turtle Island in Chapter 3. This weapon will increase the damage dealt by a pillar stance moves, and it can be summoned to execute the thunder at the enemy's feet. Overall, this is a quite easy weapon to get, which is very powerful and with great damage. And as I said, we will use this weapon until we get the mythical weapon called the Jingu Bang, which unlike the other weapons will count as the 5th piece and give us extremely good set bonuses. Then next we have the vessel, and we are going to use the Wind Tamer. This is the best vessel in the game, because once you activate it, it will massively increase our damage reduction for a short duration and give us immunity to strong winds. This is very effective against specific hard bosses. Then afterwards we have the Spirit, and the best spirit for fighting bosses is the Wandering Wight, because it does massive damage in front of the target, and make sure to use it when you really need more burst damage against the enemy. And then last but not the least we have the Curios, and the more you progress through the game, the more slots and Curios you will obtain, and the top 3 best ones are the Matrix Orb, Gold Spike Plate and the Cat Eyes Beads. The Matrix Orb allows you to avoid Fatal Blow if you land enough hits on the enemy. Then the Gold Spike Plate increases our defense considerably and deals damage to surrounding enemies upon taking a hit. And then the Cat Eye Beads will increase our overall critical hit chance. Then now let's move over to the relics, and the best relic that I recommend to use is the Craving Eyes with the Keen Insight passive. This will give us a massive increase to our critical hit damage, and as we want to stack as much damage as possible, so this is very important to select. Then as far as foundations go, the higher level you will be, the more things you will have to upgrade and max out. Personally, what you can see is the way I have upgraded it, and you should use this exact setup as well, but in order you do this doesn't really matter as much as in other games. So what I recommend to do is just start with the martial arts, then move over to the stamina, and finish off with upgrading the survival tree. What at least I did was first of all unlocking the perks, and then when I unlocked everything I needed, only then I started to upgrade the perks to the higher tiers. Next up we have the staff stances, and this time the order you unlock things will matter a lot, especially if you're still in the early game. So the best stance by far is the smash stance, so we want to unlock all of these, and only then when we have unlocked everything we needed, only then we go to the pillar stance and unlock the rest of the perks. Smash stance gives us damage, and then the pillar stance gives us more defenses. In early game the bosses are not that difficult, so if we first of all upgrade our damage, then we will be able to speedrun through the game much quicker. Then afterwards we have the Mysticism, and here we simply want to get the whole Immobilize tree. The Immobilize is the best and most useful spell by far, because we will use it a lot to stun and immobilize the enemy, so then we can do free easy damage. This is the best and one of the most optimal ways to increase the duration and damage while stunned. So what I usually do is control the boss by using the Immobilize, and then I save mana for emergency stun after the cooldown is refreshed. Then next up we have the Alteration, and here this time we don't want to select anything. By progressing through the game we get sparks, which are very valuable, and that's why we need to use them very effectively. And even at level 90, there are still better places to spend them than right here. Then as far as Force Chance, we fully want to spec into the A Pluck of Many spell. This will give us the ability to create a bunch of monkey clones that will help us to escape or do even more damage on top of everything else. Then for one of the last parts of our build we have the Transformation, and this is more of a personal preference. What usually the best case to do is change the transformation that you use, depending on what type of boss you're fighting. I really like the Moon Roam and the Riot Tides, or burn damage or damage increase after a perfect dodge. With both of these options you can't go wrong, but if you truly want to get the maximum percentage out of your build, switching this between each boss fight is a tactic that you can do as well. And then for the last and final part, we have come to the gameplay. So the best way to beat enemies in Black Myth Wukong is by avoiding melee attacks with dodge or pillar stance, while also immobilizing the target with the immobilize spell. Some of the bosses will always begin the battle with a jumping lunge attack, so dodging it can be a bit tricky, but if you press the dodge button just before he reaches you, then you should trigger a perfect dodge. While this is not essential, using a perfect dodge along with a counter attack can easily stagger the enemy, which will give you few valuable seconds to deal free damage. If you are unsure about your dodge timing in Black Myth Wukong, then you can simply move around the boss and only attack when you see a clear opening. The best way to handle most fights is by using the various combos, unlocked through the Staff Stance's talent tree. The most effective combo is the double light attack, followed by a short delay and then a heavy attack. This combo easily staggers most enemies, which gives you more opportunities to deal damage. So, our build's primary objective is to stun and crowd control enemies, while doing very high critical damage. This setup will focus on spells like the Immobilization and Burst, via the Spirit and Transformation spells and talents. So let's move over to the best spells, and we will mainly use the Immobilization and Cloud Step. Immobilization controls the boss, allowing for free damage. You can use Immobilization spell at the start of the encounter, to get a good damage burn on the target. Stagnation and Crash talents from the Mysticism Immobilization tree are your best way to increase the duration and damage while stunned. What I usually do is control the boss, and save mana for an emergency stun after the cooldown is refreshed. And then the Cloud Step spell is useful for the mobility aspect of creating distance away from the boss. Bosses like the Red Lung, for example, have devastating melee attacks, and that's why you will likely need to use stamina for dodging, and a carefully timed Cloud Step to create maximum distance. So by using combination of dodge, Cloud Step and sprinting to avoid damage and attacks will be the best way for us to stay alive. Next up we have the transformation, and the best one to use in the early to mid game is the Riot Tides, because this will deal significant burn damage to the enemies. The damage over time slashing attacks are helpful when you need to deal damage in quick successions and evade attacks, and you can unlock the Red Tide after defeating the Guanzi in chapter 1. Then as far as stances go, for this build I recommend to use the Smash or Pillar stance. The best damage combination to use is 2 consecutive light attacks, followed by a heavy attack, and then reevaluating the boss position and signs of the counter attack. The most important talent to unlock for Smash stance is the Force Compound, so you can charge the heavy attack while sprinting. This will allow you to charge in or flee while preparing for the burst damage. And then the second stance you should use is the Pillar stance, which has some of the best defensive capabilities, since early game bosses are entirely ground based, so you can use the Perch heavy attack and keep yourself in the air to avoid damage. If you struggle with incoming damage, you can as well swap to the Pillar stance and play defensive. I recommend to take the Steel Pillar skill to reduce the stamina cost while perched, and then the Towering Mountain to slam down the heavy attack damage after perching. Next up, let's take a look at the best skills and talents for our build. So the best talents are Stagnation, Force Inbound, and Steel Pillar. Stagnation increases the duration of the Immobilize spell when light attacking the target, which gives us free damage. Then Force Inbound allows us to charge heavy attacks while sprinting, and Steel Pillar will help you to stay above the boss when you are perched in a pillar stance. Here are my top 5 best skills and talents. So first of all, we have the Stagnation and the Mysticism Immobilize. So hitting an immobilized enemy with the light attacks extends the duration. This is very helpful to keep doing free damage to the boss. Then for the second one we have the Force Inbound in the Staff Stance Smash. This will give us mobility while maintaining force. Then for the third one we have the Steel Pillar in the Staff Stance Pillar. This reduces the cost for maintaining balance, which is helpful to extend duration while we are above the boss. Then we have the Bait in Alteration Cloud Step. This decoy deals shock damage which is useful if you use Cloud Step to create distance. And finally we have the Simenian Agility in Foundation Stamina. This lowers stamina cost of dodging, which is helpful to maintain our defenses. Next up we have the Curious, and for this build, the best Curious is good Spike Plate and a Jade Jar, because you can increase the defense and survive attacks. The Gold Spike Plate perk increases defensives considerably and deals damage to surrounding enemies upon taking a hit, while the Jade Jars perk will moderately increase our defenses. So this is a good second option as well. Then we have the Spirit, and the best spirit for fighting bosses is the Wandering Wight, because it does massive damage in front of the target, but make sure that you use this when you really need more burst damage against the enemy. Then for one of the last parts of our build we have the Relic. The main relic that I recommend is the Craving Eyes, with the Opportune Watcher passive, because this will give us increased focus with light attacks. Therefore you want to use the Immobilize spell to stun the boss and generate focus with the Opportune Watcher passive. Then next up we have the gear and items that we should use, and I recommend to start with the Rat Sage Staff, which will give us 66 attack. This item is craftable after defeating the final boss of chapter 2, the Yellow Wind Sage. Then for armor we want to get the Bronze Armor set, and this will include the Bronze Monkey Mask, the Bronze Brocade Battle Robe, the Bronze Arm Guards, and the Bronze Buskins. All of these items are craftable after the chapter 2. The 2-piece bonus for this set will deal additional damage to the enemies upon crashing their immobilization. Moreover, the 4-piece bonus will dramatically reduce the cooldowns of the Immobilize spell. This is a great set to use, considering that most enemies are vulnerable to the immobilization, and it can be locked in a place easily. And finally, for the vessel, we want to get the Fireproof Mantle. This item can be acquired in chapter 1 after exploring the ancient Guojin temple. It provides increased burn resistance for its passive effect, and it can be activated to gain immunity from the burns. And now last but not the least, we have come to the gameplay part. Every boss fight will be different, but I will try to summarize the overall experience. So, the best way to beat enemies in Black Myth Wukong is by avoiding melee attacks, which we can do by using the Cloud Step or Pillar Stance, while also immobilizing the target with the Immobilize spell. Some bosses like the Red Long, for example, will always begin the battle with a jumping lunge attack, so dodging it can be a tricky, but if you press dodge button just before dragon reaches you, then you should trigger a perfect dodge. While it's not essential, using perfect dodge along with the Cloud Step counterattack can easily stagger the enemy, which will give you a few valuable seconds to deal free damage. But if you are unsure about your dodging in this game, then you can simply move around the boss and only attack when you see a clear opening. The best way to handle most fights is by using the various combos unlocked through the Staff Stance's talent tree. The most effective combo is the double light attack, followed by a short delay and then a heavy attack. You can chain this combo into another heavy attack if you have enough focus points. This combo will easily stagger most enemies, which will give you more opportunities to deal damage.